This week on Jerusalem Dateline, U.S. evangelicals meet for the first time with controversial Saudi leader Mohammed bin Salman and the Crown Prince of the UAE. Prime Minister Netanyahu visits Oman, and the Israeli national anthem is played in the Arab world. Is a new day dawning in the Middle East? Plus, anti-Semitism on the rise culminates in a deadly synagogue attack in Pittsburgh. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Now might not be the best time to visit Saudi Arabia, but a delegation of U.S. evangelical leaders felt it was a risk worth taking. They met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and other Saudi leaders. I met with those evangelical leaders in the United Arab Emirates. And as we see in this report, their meeting was filled with both political controversy and spiritual opportunity. The visit came following a global firestorm over the death of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, but the planning began a long time ago. The meeting between evangelical leaders from the U.S. and Mohammed bin Salman had been in the works for months, but it came to pass when the delegation made a visit here to the United Arab Emirates.
I think there's a lot of people that would say this is the wrong time to go to Saudi Arabia and meet with the leadership there. I understand that criticism, but I disagree.
While they realized the potential for controversy, the group felt the opportunity to help Christians there was more important.
Given the fact that we care about the people of Saudi Arabia, Christianity in the Arabian Peninsula, the desire to see more freedom of worship, even Christian churches being allowed to be built. Listen, this all seemed important to us.
When people ask, why would you go and why would you meet? I mean, as a Christian called to be a peacemaker, as an advocate for freedom of worship, as an advocate for tolerance and peaceful coexistence, I mean, my answer to that question is, how can I not?
They went not with a political agenda, but with a Christian mission.
Well, when I think of Saudi Arabia, I think of that verse, we are ambassadors for Christ. That's who we're representing, not the United States of America. We're representing the Lord Jesus Christ.
You know, in the Bible, people like Esther, who was in a royal court, Daniel, who approached several kings and played key positions, God used them to speak to people in authority, kings, and the Bible says we're to pray for them.
This is the latest in a series of meetings with Sunni Arab leaders. Those leaders including Jordan's King Abdullah, Egyptian President El-Sisi, and the Crown Prince of the UAE. The meetings are part of a long-term agenda.
We aren't here for a short-term purpose. We are not here for a photo op. We could care less about that. We're here to build long-term relations and to benefit our brothers and sisters that are here in this region.
Rosenberg encouraged Christians to pray.
We're under no illusions about the challenges that have been in Saudi Arabia and remain, but I think it's respectful to go and listen to leaders who have the opportunity to make life better for Christians and actually for Muslims and potentially for Israel as well. I ask people to pray. Pray for the king, pray for the crown prince, pray for the leaders, pray for the people of Saudi Arabia.
Next door to Saudi Arabia sits the United Arab Emirates. There, for the first time, an Israeli sports team competed in an Arab country under its own flag and national anthem. The historic event marked a breakthrough for the Middle East. I was in Abu Dhabi and heard how this could be a sign of major changes for the region. Israel's Minister of Culture and Sports, Miri Regev, listened to history being made as Hatikva, her country's national anthem, played during the medal ceremonies following this international judo competition. That followed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's short visit to Oman, the first by an Israeli Prime Minister. Another first came when a delegation of American evangelical leaders came here to Abu Dhabi, the capital of the United Arab Emirates.
What we found here in our meetings with the Crown Prince and with many senior leaders here is an extraordinary story that's almost a hidden treasure of moderation, of resistance to radical Islamism, to wanting a close relationship with the United States, and freedom of worship for Christians.
The delegation, which represents millions of Christians, met with the Crown Prince and other senior leaders.
You're seeing these Islamic leaders all across the region say, we're done with the terrorist, we're done with the extremist, we're going to change from the inside out, and we're going to be a more tolerant society. And the UAE is like miles and miles ahead of the pack. They even have a minister of tolerance.
Respect each other, believe in each other.
We have come over here as advocates for Jesus Christ, but also for our fellow believers. We've seen already there's numbers of churches that are already operating here. There's been a real growth among believers, and there's been a tolerance on the part of the Muslim government in the United Arab Emirates toward Christians.
It's not an American model of religious freedom for everyone and freedom of speech, but they're moving in a very good direction. This would be a great model for the regions in the area.
Rosenberg sees a geopolitical convergence of the U.S., Israel, and the Sunni Arab states unifying to fight Islamic terrorism and a common enemy, Iran.
Americans should be encouraged that, you know what, there are serious threats in this region, but there are also real serious allies.
Many here hope this is the beginning of a new day in the Middle East.
In the Middle East right now, there is a wave of change going all across the region. It is unbelievable.
We are entering into a new season. The fact that an American evangelical Christian delegation is here, headed by a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen, this is not normal for this part of the world. But it's exciting.
As we've seen, change is happening in the Middle East. New York Rabbi Mark Schneier is president of the Foundation for Ethnic Understanding and has been cultivating relations with Muslim leaders for a decade. Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl sat down with Rabbi Schneier in our Jerusalem studio to hear about his experience with leaders in the Muslim world.
Rabbi Mark Schneier, welcome to Jerusalem Dateline.
It's a pleasure to be here.
What gave you the idea to start working with the Muslim world?
My first relationship was with the late king of Saudi Arabia, the late King Abdullah. And he convened in 2008 in Madrid an interreligious conference bringing together global religious leaders, some 250 participants. Then there are two great Muslim nations, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. In fact, I would say among the 57 Muslim nations in the world, when it comes to supporting Israel, when it comes to its treatment of its local Jewish community, there are 25,000 Jews living in that Muslim country. I would say Azerbaijan today, among the Muslim world, would be number one.
How did they receive you? And how many countries are we talking about that you travel to?
No pun intended, but they received me royally because I'm typically the guest of the royal family. I'd say it's a good 10 countries that I am very, very engaged with within the Muslim world. Typically, my conversations always segue to how to improve relations between them and the State of Israel, how to move the Gulf and Israel closer together. So we are living in extraordinary, if not miraculous times. You see the hand of God bringing together, the forces of a Donald Trump and Israel and the Gulf. We need to see Iran not as the curse, but as a blessing in terms of bringing these forces together. And you also see this coming together for other reasons, for economic reasons. I do believe that within the next 2 years, you will see the establishment of relations between Gulf countries and the State of Israel.
What do you think has been the key to opening their hearts? Was it economic or Israel's success, curiosity, the threat from Iran?
If this was a multiple choice exam, I would choose E, all of the above.
Okay.
All right, I would say Iran, the common threat, the economic opportunities between Israel and the Gulf. How many Gulf leaders have shared with me? They've said, Rabbi, you probably think that we're coming closer to Israel because of the fear of Iran. That would be second to the economic opportunities. How many Gulf leaders on the highest possible level said, Rabbi, between Israel's brain trust and our wealth, we can create the most powerful region in the world. Another contributing factor is that they see the State of Israel as the representative body for the Jewish people, and they want to come closer to the Jewish people. So there are truly a host of reasons and factors as to why we are now seeing this movement in terms of the Gulf and the State of Israel.
Thank you, Rabbi Schneier, for joining us on Jerusalem Dateline.
Thank you.
Up next, anti-Semitism culminates in a horrific terror attack in a Pittsburgh synagogue. Is this only the beginning? Israeli leaders stepped in to comfort and console American Jews after a gunman massacred 11 Jews at a Pittsburgh synagogue. From a country that has suffered from terror attacks for decades, its message to American Jewry: we must fight anti-Semitism. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has that story.
Jerusalem lit up the old city walls with American and Israeli flags in support of American Jewry after 11 Jews were murdered during morning prayers at a Pittsburgh synagogue.
I feel your pain today, and with me is the entire Jewish people. It is hard for us to believe, hard for us to understand how hatred and evil rose up to damage and to uproot the tree of life.
Israeli President Reuven Rivlin sent a taped message to an interfaith memorial service on Sunday. It was the worst attack against the Jewish community in U.S. history.
We must say loud and clear, this was an attack of anti-Semitism. Our brothers and sisters, friends and family were murdered because they were Jews.
At least 2,000 mourners packed the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall in Pittsburgh and stood to recite the Jewish mourners' prayer with Rivlin. Israel sent government minister Naftali Bennett to Pittsburgh to console the community shortly after the attack. Bennett also addressed the crowd and told them that hating Jews is not a distant memory. From Sderot to Pittsburgh, the hand that fires missiles is the same hand that shoots worshipers. We will fight against the hatred of Jews and anti-Semitism wherever it raises its head, and we will prevail. Uncharacteristically, the governments of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Qatar all made statements condemning the attack, and even the Palestinian Authority referred to it as an act of terrorism. Back home, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and cabinet ministers opened their weekly meeting with a minute of silence. Netanyahu issued a call for the whole world to unite to fight anti-Semitism in every form.
We must stand and fight back against all these fronts, against this zealous, brutal anti-Semitism, which starts with Jews and never ends with Jews.
Shortly after the attack, Netanyahu released a video in English summing up the sentiments of Israel.
The entire people of Israel grieve with the families of the dead. We stand together with the Jewish community of Pittsburgh. We stand together with the American people in the face of this horrendous anti-Semitic brutality. And we all pray for the speedy recovery of the wounded.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
America was once considered a safe haven for refugees from anti-Semitism. But the Pittsburgh massacre raises a sad and even shocking question. Is America no longer safe for Jews? Dale Hurd reports on the global plague that's now showing its ugly face in America.
European Jews once fled to America for safety. That may change. The Anti-Defamation League says the number of anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. rose nearly 60% last year alone. And Saturday's synagogue massacre must have American Jews wondering if it could become too dangerous for them in the U.S.
It's been said that when Nazi persecution of the Jews began, the Jews who were pessimists went to New York. The Jews who were optimists went to Auschwitz.
Meaning the Jews who thought the persecution would stop paid with their lives. One of the lessons of the Holocaust for Jews has been, when persecution begins, don't wait to leave. Alan Hoffman, head of the Jewish Agency, which helps Jews return to Israel, says Jews today are no longer waiting to be attacked. Simply the fear that a nation has become unsafe is enough for them to pick up and leave.
Families say, if this is what the future is going to look like, I don't think that this is what I'd like to see for my children.
Jews who are old enough to have lived through the Holocaust, like Belgian Professor Julian Klenner, are asking, why is this happening to me again?
How comes that the Shoah was not able to quiet down people about Jews? Why didn't that disappear? What have I done to deserve that?
Anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic attacks have been a much bigger problem in Europe because of Muslim immigration and because anti-Semitism has now infected the European left. Budapest Rabbi Shlomo Koves told us Jews remain the world's chief scapegoat for blame.
You know, there's a joke in Hungary that somebody comes to a village and he says, is there anti-Semitism here? So they say, no, there isn't, but there's a great need for it.
But why has this happened in America? Dr. Michael Rydelnik, professor of Jewish studies at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, is the son of Holocaust survivors.
Anti-Semitism it's like a contagious disease that's always under the surface, and sometimes it spurs up into epidemic proportions, and then sometimes it recedes.
But Rydelnik says the real source of anti-Semitism is Satan and those who hate God.
They hate the God of Israel, and so therefore they want to hurt him by hurting his people. Those who love the God of Israel need to be the loudest voices in opposing it.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Coming up, Israelis go to the polls to elect new mayors across the country, including Jerusalem. Millions of Israelis voted across the country this week. One of the most talked about elections was in Jerusalem, where two-term Mayor Ni르바르ẇ stepped aside to join national politics. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl takes a look at the popular outgoing mayor.
During his 10 years of leading Jerusalem, Ni르바르ẇ sought to turn Israel's poorest city into one rich in culture, tourism, and with a sustainable economy.
The city has a role to play. It's the center of the world.
Some 900,000 people live in Jerusalem. About 64% are Jewish, 34% Muslim, and 2% Christian. In an interview with CBN's Scott Ross, Barkat was adamant that the city not be divided.
It cannot be divided. It will never function as a divided city. It has to be one physical city, enabling all to worship their faith their way, to respect each other, and there's room for all. I'm also a high-tech entrepreneur, a venture capitalist. It will never work. There's not one good example of a city that was split that ever functioned.
Barkat took office in 2008, shortly before former U.S. President Barack Obama entered the White House. Obama's administration pressured Israel to stop building in eastern Jerusalem, an issue Barkat said the West just doesn't understand.
God forbid, if I would have listened to the international community and stopped building in the city of Jerusalem, meaning stop building all the schools that I just demonstrated, we built 171 classrooms, or the road infrastructure, or does anybody tell me as mayor of Jerusalem that if somebody wants to build a piece of land, I should ask him, wait a minute, if you're Jewish, you're not allowed, if you're Christian, you're not allowed, only if you're Muslim, you're allowed?
He also aimed to improve quality of life gaps between various sectors of society, such as building this girls' school in the Arab sector. In the end, Barkat was able to welcome the new U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem after President Trump recognized the city as Israel's capital. One of Barkat's philosophies was to introduce his city to the world vis-a-vis non-spiritual events. That's one reason he started the Jerusalem Marathon in 2010, which he ran part of each year. In 2015, Barkat risked his own life when he helped subdue a terrorist after the stabbing of a religious Jew. As seen on security cameras, the mayor, in the white shirt, and his security guard jumped out of the car and tackled the terrorist. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told CBN News at the time Barkat displayed true bravery.
I thought the mayor showed exemplary courage.
Though Israel has not heard the last of Barkat, it's clear that with his exit, a new era is beginning in Jerusalem. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Still ahead, a first-hand look at what it's like to vote in the Jewish state. Several mayoral elections throughout Israel ended in a runoff, and Jerusalem is one of those cities. But what's it like for Israelis to vote? Here's Julie Stahl to show you what voting is like in Israel. And it's an example of what you can find on our social media platforms.
It's election day here in Israel, and we're at a polling station in Jerusalem's Arnona neighborhood. It's one of 11,000 polling stations where some 6.5 million Israelis will be voting. Now, these are municipal elections today, not for Knesset, not for the Prime Minister, but they're important elections for the mayors of cities and council heads. In Jerusalem, we've had Mayor Ni르바르캇 for 10 years, but he's decided to move on into national politics. So Israelis have been left with a choice of about 4 viable candidates. It's not sure who is going to win. Pretty sure that no candidate will get the 40% threshold that's needed to actually become the mayor. So probably in about 2 weeks we'll have runoff elections. Now there are about 270,000 Israelis who will be able to vote for the first time. Now in municipal elections in Israel, anyone who's a resident of Israel, you don't have to be a citizen, is allowed to vote. In Jerusalem alone, there are some 200,000 Arab or Palestinian residents, official residents of Jerusalem. They've been offered citizenship, many of them. They choose not to take it, but they're allowed to vote in municipal elections. They most of the time choose not to vote in municipal elections kind of as a protest against the state of Israel. In fact, there was going to be one Arab mayoral candidate this time, and he was threatened so much he pulled out of the race. Arabs are allowed to vote in Jerusalem, and anyone who's a resident is allowed to vote here. Doesn't matter what your religion is. Now, because many of the polling stations are at schools, and because they want to encourage people to vote, it's actually a public holiday on voting day in Israel. So Israelis are off of work today. Of course, many people go to the beach or go shopping or go to restaurants after they've voted, but it's kind of a nice casual holiday, not much traffic on the roads. So all the voters get a voting card like this, and it tells you the address of where you're going to go, and this gives you the permission to vote. And it's got a number on it, 796, that's my number, and it's on the board here, 796, and it tells me to go this way. It's simple, and that's all it takes to vote.
That's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Please pray about the major changes taking place in the Middle East, and especially for the families and friends of those who died in the horrific massacre in Pittsburgh.